Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 644. Releasing worldwide on digital this December 16 is The Program, a documentary that delves into the explosive claims made at the 2023 US hearing into UAP activity that the US government has top secret programs involved with the recovery of UFO craft and its non-human occupants. Featuring exclusive interviews with insiders, experts, and politicians. The program also marks the latest film by director James Fox, whose documentaries into the UFO phenomenon have proven to be the gold standard. And I got to say, the program continues that trend. And I'm so happy to say that James Fox joins me today. James, how are you?
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm great. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. And it's really interesting. We spoke back in 2022 for Moment of Contact. Since that time, this whole subject has been rapidly advancing, especially in regards to these US Senate hearings. We've had two. They had one in 2022, had one recently, only last month. So much information coming out. The most explosive are those, of course, those claims by David Gruish, talking about these programs. And I'm sure you would have heard previously about this before and touched about it before in your documentaries, but now you have someone actually on oath talking about it in a US hearing. When that happens and you're listening to it, what happens to you as a filmmaker? Does the brain start firing? Do you start thinking to yourself, yes, this is something that I could really dig my teeth into now and talk to people about this because this man has gone on record and we can really make something really cool in regards to a documentary about this?
Well, so it was kind of somewhat personal for me because I just came off of making The Phenomenon, and then um, I sort of backtracked a little bit, and I covered a case that was supposed to be included in the phenomenon, and that's the alleged UFO crash in Varginha, Brazil in 1996.
Yes.
And I couldn't squeeze it into the movie. Phenomenon was a better film without it. And I decided to, hit the pause button instead of jumping right into what was happening in Washington, D.C., post the phenomenon and post the New York Times article and the revelation of a secret Pentagon UFO program. And I sort of stuck my teeth in for the better part of 2 years into this case in Varginha, Brazil. And when I work, I almost should just have blinders on because I'm very, very focused on the task at hand. Making a documentary, particularly in this case, in a foreign language that's enjoyable to watch without being overwhelmed reading subtitles, was a huge challenge. And I had a lot of people warning me that people just weren't ready for live aliens walking through a town and being captured and the UFO crashing, and it was all too much.
Hmm.
And then I was going to jeopardize my connections with the intel community, with the likes of like Senator Harry Reid, and the level of access that I managed to obtain post the phenomenon. But I really felt differently that there was enough compelling eyewitness testimony to create a pretty strong argument that something truly extraordinary took place. And so I put the focus on, and I did that film. While I was doing that, I remember getting a couple of urgent requests from Lou Elizondo and a couple of the people on the Hill requesting screeners of the Moment of Contact. And I was like, well, look, it's not done yet. It's a rough cut. I don't care. Send it. You don't understand. There are people here. You can't imagine who's watching this kind of thing. And so I was sending screeners. Well, little did I know what was brewing in the background. David Grush was preparing to come forward, uncovering a crash retrieval program, all these things, all the legislation that was being written. And so when I launched the program, it was personal for me. And when, I don't know, what was it? Probably 5 months into making the programs, maybe 6 at the most. I usually have a couple months leading up to filming, and then I get in the field to film. I was probably filming in February 2023. So March, April, May, June, July. So 5 months later, there we have David Grush testifying under oath
Hmm.
that we have a crash retrieval program. that we have recovered objects of non-human intelligence. I mean, it was a staggering revelation, and one of which I never anticipated in my lifetime to witness. And so I remember the day it took place. I would have loved to have been at the hearings. I couldn't make it. I was involved with production with the program. I just simply couldn't make it. I could have probably killed myself and maybe made it. And but I watched it live, and I remember sitting there glued to my phone live, and I just had tears running down my cheeks. I was all by myself. Tears just stream, a constant stream coming down and I thought of like decades of ridicule and laughter and all of that stuff that I've been subjected to pretty much my entire adult life, And it was a moment in my career for me. It was a moment because it wasn't like I believed the guy because he's a high level intelligence officer. People say it's a psych ops, whatever. But everything he was saying aligned with my research in the field, right? So that's why I believed it. I believed it because of the research I'd done into previous crash cases, particularly Roswell and Virginia, but also Kingman and Kecksburg and a handful of other cases that had happened over the decades. So anyway, I kind of wanted to capture an unprecedented time in history where there's this push for government transparency to really find out among our elected officials on what the intelligence agencies really knew about the phenomenon.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. What is your philosophy when it comes to putting together a documentary like this? Is your aim to appease to the converted and kind of just talk to them, or are you talking to the skeptic? I think I heard you say before in the previous interview, it's kind of like presenting evidence to a jury in a certain way, the way you want to put your documentaries together. Is that how you kind of see your work in regards to film documentaries? Are you putting together a case? Are you putting together something so you can say to the skeptics, look, you might come into this movie thinking one way, but I promise you at the end of it, you're going to be thinking another? Because in all transparency here, ask me before I watched, say, The Phenomenon, like several years back. I was very much in the skeptic camp, but these days, if I'm anything, while I'm not close to being a convert, I'm way more closer on that line of anything other than I was before after watching your documentary. So is that something that motivates you, and is that something that underpins the philosophy of what a James Fox documentary is?
Yeah, because I hate to be that guy who wants to push an objective or come join my cult of believers kind of thing. For me, it's like I remember I often ask the question, if any of these allegations are true, how significant of a story would this be? And everybody says, oh my God, that would be it. I don't think there'd be anything more mind-blowing than this, right? And so as somebody who's pretty convinced from my work in the field, I feel like I want to have the opportunity to put together what I find the most compelling aspects of the phenomenon globally, right? Eyewitness testimony, any potential crash cases, and put it together in a way that can make sense to a mainstream, somewhat skeptical audience. Again, not like I'm trying to convert people, but I feel like there's a body of evidence that hasn't been given a fair shake. That hasn't been like, I'll give an example. I remember back in 2020, I was about to do business with Netflix, and they watched The Phenomenon. That ultimately made me an offer, but they were like, well, this landing case in Africa, you don't really have an opposing viewpoint in there. So we really want to get somebody in there to say an opposing viewpoint. And I said, okay, so what you're saying is you want me to put in someone who wasn't there to say what the kids didn't see,
Mm.
or they might have seen, it's like, and I said, I'm not drawing any conclusions within that. But what I am doing is providing a platform for the people that were there to say what they saw, not an explanation of what they saw. And that's it. And then allow the audience to draw their own conclusions, kind of thing. Because I really feel like that mentality has been uh, within the UFO community, or been within this topic for decades.
Yep.
I want to just provide a platform and allow the people that were there to describe what they saw, and then allow the audience, the viewer, to draw their own conclusions. And that's kind of, what I see when I watched everything that's been happening since 2017 right up to 2024. That's what I tried to do as well with the program, was to kind of soften all the noise and just put a laser-like focus on the progress that has been made and the allegations that have been made by the people that have been making them.
Once in a while, I like to ask a silly question. It's just like a nagging kind of thought that always sticks with me when I watch movies, and I'd like to present one to you right now, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, not
Um,
at all.
so the whole thing about the crash retrieval thing has been with us since Roswell, right? Like that's kind of like the first proper example we have of this. And the thing that's been always been on my mind, and it's a two-pronged question. Why is it that an advanced species with this technology are crashing? Number one. And number two, do you think we are playing any part in that as a species? Are we have we figured out a way to kind of tinker with their technology and making them crash so we can mine their technologies and biogenics? I mean, is that something that's ever come across in your investigations, that maybe we are doing something to make these beings and these craft crash on our surface?
So 47, I interviewed a guy. He's somewhat of a controversial character, although he is who he says he was, and he was where he says he was. He wrote a book called Roswell, The Day After Roswell, Philip Corso. And Philip claimed to me that, I think he even said this, yeah, he did say this on camera. He said that the Roswell, in his opinion, and he could be wrong, I'm not saying this is fact, he said that we were developing a new type of radar that he felt interfered with the navigational systems of these discs. And
Mm.
that was one of his reasons for the alleged crash in Roswell. Do I know that to be true? I do not. But he definitely put that forward as a plausible explanation as to how those two objects collided with each other and ultimately crashed and were picked up in the desert. Now, there's a case that happened in Kingman, Arizona, that I've been looking into. There's some memos in the documentary, and I spoke with a number of individuals who will remain nameless, who said to me, the object didn't have a scratch on it. I said, "What do you mean didn't have? What are you talking about? Didn't have a scratch? It crashed? No, it didn't crash." I said, "Okay, well, what did it do?" It was like it landed and the occupants left. I said, "Well, how do you know there were any occupants?" Well, it could have been a probe. He said, "Well, the doors were open and the occupants were gone." So I
Mm.
said, "You're telling me that this object came down like a gift from the sky, landed, they opened up the doors, left the doors open, and walked away?" Yes. Okay. Do I believe that? I don't know. I certainly, my sources are pretty good. Um, I'm certainly open to believing that. I'll give you another case, 96 in Varginha, Brazil. The witnesses that I interviewed firsthand that saw it, three of them, they said it had a huge gash in the side of it, big with white smoke, like a vapor coming out the back. And it was struggling to fly. And it struggled for several hours before it ultimately crashed into the ground at like 5:30 o'clock in the morning or something like that, 6 o'clock in the morning. And those witnesses. Now, how did that gash get there? Was it struck by lightning? Did it get hit by, a meteorite? Was it shot at? Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. But those are just three cases that involved three different theories, possible theories on explanations on how these things went down. But I don't know.
Have, yeah, it's such an interesting part of the whole story here. Um, I want to ask, and I'm not sure I've asked this before, but have you ever thought about making a feature dramatic film based on any of the experiences that you've captured in your documentary. Like for example, when I was listening to the story from Jason Sands in the movie, I was thinking to myself, you know, this would be a great opening scene for a film based on Jason's experiences. Like I can imagine like a scene like the car going down the desert and seeing the bean and I mean this would be great as also as a because as a feature film. Have you ever thought about doing like a dramatic feature based on some of these cases, or do you think that documentary is only the realm of filmmaking that you're gonna stay in?
I've there are three films that I would make, possibly more. This is something that I've thought about quite seriously, and I've even talked to some directors about it, because I would be more involved as a consultant
Or
because
producer or something? Yeah.
actor, producer, consultant. Um, One would be the 1964 landing case at Socorro, New Mexico. That's just because that case is the turning point for the very man who investigated UFOs in an official capacity for the United States Air Force, Dr. Jalen Hynek. And it had so much evidence on the ground. It's a close encounter of the third kind. The police officer on duty came face to face with these alleged beings. And that's a really, really good case. And what happened to the witness, the police officer after the fact? Great case. Another one I would do would be 1994 landing in Rua, Zimbabwe at the aerial school. The other one I would do would be the 1996 Virginia, Brazil documentary. I think that would be a great major motion picture, no doubt about it. Your idea of a potential whistleblower in the encounter in the desert in 1994, sure, why not? Great, that'd be really dramatic.
I think
Imagine,
yeah, go
well,
ahead.
just imagine if it was true. Imagine if that really did happen, and obviously, I think it probably did, but I can't prove it. And then having to live with that.
Yeah. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. I think the way that you can easily do it as a movie, not only would it be a great sci-fi movie, but it also makes a great kind of psychological drama as well. The effects on the person
Yeah.
afterwards, you know, all the stuff that they deal with. I mean, it's such great stories, fascinating occurrences that happen. And like I said, I love to see it as a. So if you ever do go ahead and do it, I think I would encourage you to do so because it'd be awesome to see these things also in a feature film aspect. We live in really interesting time right now in that we have Donald Trump coming back into the presidency. And he has said before, and he reiterated again with his recent interview with Joe Rogan, that he's open to bringing out more information in regards to classified documents surrounding some of this stuff. And it's really interesting, some of these cabinet picks, Marco Rubio, for example, has been very much an advocate for this stuff as well.
Ratcliffe.
Can you foresee perhaps during this upcoming administration some more transparency in regards to this, or do you think this is more talk and we're not going to get what we're hoping we would from a former president, upcoming president who, by all accounts, doesn't like any of these kind of covert deep state kind of stuff. And but essentially with the program, we're dealing with like a government within a government kind of deal because a lot of like politicians don't know what's going on. That's why we have these hearings, right?
Right.
He's against that stuff philosophically. Do you foresee him perhaps releasing some more context in regards to what's going on here?
So I think that if any president was going to do it, it would be Donald Trump. Remember, he was in office when the secret Pentagon UFO program, OSAP or ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was leaked on the cover of the New York Times. I was told at the time he was debriefed to a certain level, and but he didn't make any public statements then. Things have changed. We've had some congressional hearings, but he had, he had a number of years to make some statements, and he chose not to for whatever reason. However, a lot has changed since then. You know, we've had 3 congressional hearings.
Mm.
during the Biden administration. President Joe Biden hasn't made any statements. In fact, the statements that he has made have been sort of laughable. I was quite honestly pretty disappointed. Chuck Schumer said a lot more on the House floor with
Yeah.
Senator Mike Rounce. Those guys were incredible, some of the stuff they've said, and some of the legislation and the NDAA for 2023 and 2024. It's right there in black and white, legacy program, crash recovery, any kind of reverse engineering. We include some of that information within the body of the film. But again, Ratcliffe, Rubio, very encouraging. Look, we've got the House. They're going to have control of the House now. I have tremendous faith in Burchett, Representative Burchett, and Luna and Mace, and to the Democratic side, the guy from Florida, and Garcia from California, AOC. I think that particularly Burchett, I'm anticipating that he's going to be pushing President Trump pretty hard, and he's got the ear of President Trump. So I'm optimistic. I think if it was ever going to happen, it would happen within this administration. That's just my humble opinion. Could I be wrong? I could.
Final question. If you're looking in the time span from when Out of the Blue came out to now, the amount of exposure in regards to this topic, the hearings, everything else, has been phenomenal to use a lack of a better word. Can you foresee in your lifetime, just say, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now, within that time period, can you foresee perhaps maybe footage coming out, and you talked about this before in regards to, that the government or some capacity within the government has footage, 4K, clear, proper video and stuff, not the blurry stuff that we get to see now and again. Do you foresee something like that being released in an official capacity? And from that, moving on, confirmation of many of the things that you have investigated? Or are you still skeptical that that might not happen? I'm just curious about that.
I'm optimistic. One of the things that we cover in the program is one of the whistleblowers, who doesn't reveal his identity, tells us where some of that footage should be found.
Mm.
I mean, that was pretty cool stuff. Again, I don't think they're putting the genie back in the bottle. And all of these things, podcasts, congressional hearings, documentaries like the program, all the efforts that are happening currently right now, I'm optimistic that more stuff will be coming out. I have no doubt about it. Is it a question of, people say, oh, when is disclosure going to happen? It's kind of happening right now.
Yeah. Right now, drips and drabs, but usually drips and drabs usually lead to the flood, and I think the flood's probably going to come sooner than later. I'm thinking anyway.
It's exciting times, that's for sure.
And it's a very much exciting times, and I gotta tell everyone, December 16, when the program releases worldwide and digital, I really encourage everyone to watch this movie, because as I said before, James, I believe your work, as a documentarian, in the way do you present your footage, the way do you get people to talk to you, and in the interviews you get. To me, this is the gold standard of these types of documentaries of this on this subject, and the program really is just another example of that. So I encourage everyone, December 16, watch the program, and then after that, watch the skies, because you never know where you're going to see. I thank you so much, James Fox, for your time today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.